Hello, dear listeners. Welcome back to another journey through time. I'm your Sleepless Historian, and tonight we're going to drift back 2,000 years to walk the marble halls of the greatest empire the world has ever known, the Roman Empire. Close your eyes now, let your breathing slow, and allow yourself to be transported to a time when the Mediterranean was called Mare Nostrum, our sea, when eagles soared over legions that marched from Britain to Mesopotamia, when the very word Roman meant civilization itself. Tonight's story is one of gradual rise, of patient conquest, of roads built stone by stone, of laws written carefully in marble, and of an empire that grew so slowly, so methodically, that by the time the world noticed, Rome had already embraced it all. Let us begin not with conquest, but with 7 hills, rising gently from the banks of the Tiber River, in central Italy, around the 8th century before Christ. The year was 753 BC, though of course, the Romans themselves would not count years this way for centuries to come. Picture, if you will, a collection of small villages scattered across these hills. The Palatine, the Aventine, the Capitolline, each name rolling off the tongue like a lullaby from antiquity. The people who lived here were called Latins, part of a larger group of Indo-European peoples who had settled the Italian peninsula generations upon generations before. According to legend, and oh, how the Romans loved their legends, the city was founded by twin brothers, Romulus and Remus, abandoned as infants, nursed by a she-wolf, raised by a shepherd. But legends, dear listeners, are often more beautiful than truth, and tonight we need not trouble ourselves with which is which, for in the gentle realm of half-sleep, myth and history blend like watercolors in rain. The early Romans, these farmers and herders, lived simply, their wooden huts clustered on hilltops for protection, their days measured by the rising and setting of the sun, their years by the flooding of the Tiber. Everything moved slowly then, deliberately, like honey poured from a jar on a warm summer afternoon. For 2.5 centuries, Rome was ruled by kings, 7 kings in total, their names drifting down to us like echoes in a dream. Romulus the founder, Numa Pompilius the lawgiver, Tullus Hostilius the warrior, Ancus Marcius the builder, Tarquinius Priscus the reformer, Servius Tullius the census taker, and finally, Tarquinius Superbus, Tarquin the proud. Each king ruled for decades, building slowly, expanding gradually, establishing the customs and traditions that would, in time, govern the known world. They drained the marshes between the hills, paved the first roads with fitted stone, built the first temples to Jupiter, Mars, and Vesta, goddess of the hearth, whose sacred fire burned eternally, tended by virgin priestesses, a flame that would flicker in the Roman Forum for over 1,000 years. But power, even kingly power, grows heavy with time, and in 509 BC, the Romans cast out their last king, not in revolution, not in bloodshed, but through a quiet, determined consensus that free men should not bow before tyrants. Thus began the Republic, residential publica, the public thing, a government of laws, not men. Now picture, if you can, the Roman Forum in those early Republican days, not the marble wonderland of later centuries, but a simple marketplace surrounded by wooden shops, where farmers brought their grain, potters their amphorae, metalworkers their bronze, the air thick with the scent of olive oil, fresh bread, burning charcoal, and the dust of countless sandaled feet. The new republic was governed by 2 consuls, elected for 1 year only, sharing power so that neither could become a tyrant. Below them, praetors administered justice, quaestors managed finances, aediles maintained the city. Each office had its season, its rituals, its careful boundaries, like a dance performed to music only Romans could hear. And beneath this government of magistrates, the Senate, that venerable body of former office holders, men who had already proved their worth in public service, who now advised with the weight of experience, their debates echoing softly through the curia, their decisions shaped by centuries of precedent, tradition, and the slow accumulation of wisdom. But the true genius of Rome, the secret that would carry their eagles to the ends of the earth, was not in their government, remarkable though it was, but in their approach to conquest. For Rome did not simply conquer. Rome absorbed. Rome invited. Rome made partners of former enemies. When Rome defeated a neighbor, which happened with increasing frequency as the Republic matured, they offered something unprecedented: citizenship, or at least the promise of citizenship. Alliance, not subjugation. Partnership, not slavery. The defeated enemy became, over time, over generations, Roman. Consider the Latins, Rome's immediate neighbors, sharing language, customs, gods. When Rome finally unified Latium in the 4th century BC, these Latin cities did not disappear, did not lose their identity. Instead, they became Roman allies. Their soldiers marched in Roman legions. Their citizens could trade in Roman markets, marry Roman wives, own Roman land, and their children, born into this expanding world, thought of themselves as Roman. The same pattern repeated again and again across Italy. The Etruscans to the north, those mysterious people who had taught Rome so much about engineering, religion, art, they too were gradually absorbed, their haruspices reading entrails for Roman generals, their architects designing Roman temples, their craftsmen decorating Roman homes. The Samnites, fierce mountain warriors who fought Rome in 3 great wars spanning half a century, ultimately laid down their arms not in defeat, but in partnership. Their young men enlisted in Roman legions. Their leaders received Roman citizenship. Their hilltop towns became Roman municipalities, connected by Roman roads, governed by Roman law. And so, city by city, tribe by tribe, alliance by alliance, Italy became Roman, not through force alone, though force was certainly used, but through the irresistible attraction of Roman civilization, Roman law, Roman opportunity, Roman citizenship. By 264 BC, just 250 years after the Republic's founding, Rome controlled the entire Italian peninsula, from the Alps to the toe of the boot. A population of perhaps 4 million people, all connected by stone roads, all protected by Roman law, all sharing in Roman prosperity, all owing loyalty to the Roman eagle. And it was then, with Italy secure, that Rome looked across the narrow waters of the Mediterranean and saw Carthage. Music shifts slightly, maintaining gentle rhythm. Carthage, that great merchant city of North Africa, founded by Phoenician colonists centuries before Rome was even a gleam in Romulus's eye. Carthage, whose purple-sailed ships carried goods from Spain to Syria, whose merchants spoke a dozen languages, whose warehouses overflowed with silver, gold, ivory, silk, precious stones, and above all, profit. The first encounter between Rome and Carthage, in 264 BC, began over a small matter, a dispute involving the Sicilian city of Messana. The kind of minor diplomatic incident that usually resolved itself through negotiation, compromise, perhaps a small payment of silver. But this time, neither side would bend, neither side would retreat, and what began as a local quarrel became a struggle for the very soul of the Mediterranean world. The First Punic War. Punic, being the Roman word for Phoenician, lasted 23 years. An entire generation of Romans and Carthaginians knew nothing but war. Fathers fought, died, were replaced by their sons, who fought, died, were replaced in turn by their sons. The war became a way of life, a tradition, a sacred duty passed down like a family name. Rome, a land power, had to learn to fight at sea. They captured a Carthaginian warship that had run aground, studied its construction, copied its design, built an entire fleet of identical vessels. 100 ships, then 200, then 300. Roman carpenters working by torchlight. Roman smiths forging bronze rams. Roman sailors learning to read the wind and stars. But Rome's genius was not in copying, but in improving. They added a new weapon to their ships, the corvus, the crow, a boarding bridge that could be dropped onto enemy vessels, allowing Roman soldiers to fight as they fought best, hand to hand, shield to shield, sword to sword, turning naval battles into land battles fought on floating wooden platforms. Year after year, the war continued. Battles won and lost, fleets built and sunk, generals celebrated and executed. The treasury of both cities strained to breaking. Their populations bled white. Their allies grew restless. But neither Rome nor Carthage would surrender. Neither would admit defeat. Both were trapped in a struggle that had taken on a life of its own. Finally, in 241 BC, exhaustion brought what victory could not. Carthage, its treasury empty, its fleet destroyed, its people are war-weary, sued for peace. Sicily, that fertile island that had sparked the conflict, became Rome's first province, its first possession beyond the Italian peninsula, the first step on a path that would lead, eventually, inevitably, to the empire. But Carthage, humbled but not destroyed, soon found new strength, new purpose, new leadership, in the person of a young general named Hannibal Barca, son of Hamilcar, grandson of warriors, heir to a hatred of Rome that burned like an altar fire, bright, constant, unquenchable. Hannibal, perhaps the greatest military mind Rome would ever face, spent his youth in Spain, building an army, forging alliances, preparing for the day when Carthage would have its revenge. His soldiers were not mere mercenaries, but believers, men who had sworn sacred oaths, who carried their general's hatred in their hearts like a sacred flame. In 218 BC, the Second Punic War began, not with a formal declaration, but with Hannibal's incredible march from Spain, across the Pyrenees, through southern Gaul, over the Alps themselves, in winter, with elephants. An army of perhaps 90,000 men, crossing mountains that had never felt the tread of African elephants, or heard the war songs of Spanish warriors, or seen the glint of Carthaginian bronze. The crossing of the Alps, surely one of the great military achievements in history, cost Hannibal dearly. Half his army perished in the mountain passes, frozen by alpine winds, buried by avalanches, lost in blizzards that turned day to night. But those who survived, those hardy few who stumbled down into the Valley, were tempered like steel in fire, unbreakable, utterly devoted to their general, ready to face the legions of Rome. And face them they did. At Trebia, where Hannibal's Numidian cavalry shattered Roman formations like pottery. At Lake Trasimene, where an entire Roman army was ambushed in the morning mist, slaughtered to a man while their general died still trying to understand what had happened. And finally, at Cannae, in 216 BC, where Hannibal achieved what military historians call the perfect battle. Even the name sounds like a sigh, a lament. At Cannae, 86,000 Romans took the field, confident in their numbers, their discipline, their inevitable victory. By sunset, 70,000 lay dead, including both consuls, 80 senators, countless nobles whose families had served Rome for generations. The largest army Rome had ever assembled, simply ceased to exist. News of Cannae reached Rome like a plague wind. Women wailed in the streets, senators spoke in whispers, allies began to calculate the benefits of joining the victor. For a moment, just a moment, it seemed that the Republic might not survive, that Rome itself might fall, that Hannibal might indeed fulfill his childhood oath to destroy the eternal enemy. But Rome did not break. Instead, the Senate appointed a dictator, Fabius Maximus, called Cunctator, the Delayer, a man who understood that sometimes wisdom lies not in action, but in patience, not in battle, but in endurance, not in winning quickly, but in refusing to lose. Fabius avoided battle. He shadowed Hannibal's army, harassed his foragers, cut his supply lines, denied him rest, denied him reinforcements, denied him the decisive victory that might have ended the war. For months, then years, Hannibal wandered Italy like a ghost, winning every battle he fought, yet somehow never winning the war. And while Hannibal wandered, Rome rebuilt, new legions were recruited, new alliances forged, new strategies developed. The Romans learned, as they always learned, from defeat. Each setback became a lesson, each loss a teacher, each death a stepping stone toward eventual victory. The war's end came not in Italy, but in Africa, when a young Roman general named Scipio, later called Africanus, landed near Carthage itself, forcing Hannibal to abandon Italy, to return home, to fight on African soil for the survival of his city. At Zama, in 202 BC, the two greatest generals of their age met in battle, and Rome, finally, irrevocably, triumphed. Hannibal fled into exile. Carthage paid crushing indemnities. Rome emerged from 17 years of war, scared but victorious, transformed but triumphant, no longer merely the greatest power in Italy, but the greatest power in the Mediterranean world, perhaps in all the world. But the empire, once tasted, becomes an appetite, and Rome, having defeated Carthage, found its legions drawn eastward toward the ancient kingdoms of Greece, Macedonia, Syria, Egypt, lands rich in art, philosophy, waiting like ripe fruit for the plucking. The conquest of the Greek world began almost accidentally with appeals from Greek cities for Roman protection against Macedonian aggression. Rome, perhaps reluctantly, perhaps inevitably, answered these appeals and found itself drawn into the intricate web of Hellenistic politics, where every alliance brought new enemies, every victory demanded new conquests, every triumph led to new responsibilities. At Cynocephaly, in 197 BC, Roman legions shattered the Macedonian phalanx, that ancient formation that had once conquered the world under Alexander. The sarissas, those 18-foot spears, proved no match for Roman flexibility, Roman adaptability, Roman willingness to learn and change and grow. At Magnesia, in 190 BC, Rome defeated Antiochus the Great, king of Syria, heir to one of Alexander's successor kingdoms, master of territories stretching from the Mediterranean to India. His defeat brought Rome to the banks of the Euphrates, to the edge of the known world, to places Roman farmers had never imagined, could never have dreamed. And at Pydna, in 168 BC, the last king of Macedon fell before Roman arms, ending a dynasty that traced its lineage back to Alexander himself. Perseus, the final king, was paraded through Rome in golden chains, a living symbol of Greek submission, a reminder that the torch of civilization had passed irrevocably to Roman hands. But conquest, true conquest, requires more than military victory. It requires transformation, assimilation, the patient work of making strangers into citizens, enemies into allies, foreigners into Romans. And nowhere was this work more challenging or more successful than in Gaul. Gaul, that vast land beyond the Alps, populated by Celtic tribes, fierce warriors who painted their bodies blue, who collected the heads of enemies, who followed druids who performed human sacrifice in sacred groves. Gaul, where Roman civilization met its antithesis, where order confronted chaos, where discipline faced wild freedom. The conquest of Gaul began in 58 BC, under a Roman proconsul named Gaius Julius Caesar, a man whose very name would become synonymous with power, with ambition, with the transformation of republic into empire. Caesar, a word that would echo through history. Kaiser, Caesar, the title of emperors yet unborn. Caesar's Gallic Wars lasted 8 years. 8 years of campaigning, of battles fought in forests and mountains, of sieges that lasted months, of victories won through engineering, through tactics, through the slow application of Roman military science to barbarian warfare. The Helvetii crushed at Bibracte, the Belgae defeated at Sabis, the Nervii annihilated at their own river. Vercingetorix, the great Gallic hero, finally captured at Alesia after a siege that became legend. Each victory added territory, added tribes, added warriors to serve in Roman auxiliaries, added wealth to Roman treasuries, added glory to Caesar's name. By 50 BC, all of Gaul, from the Rhine to the Pyrenees, from the Atlantic to the Alps, had become Roman, its Celtic culture slowly, gradually, voluntarily transforming into something new, something Roman, something that would endure for 500 years. But Caesar's conquests in Gaul, magnificent as they were, paled beside the greater conquest he achieved in Rome itself. For Caesar returned from Gaul not merely as a victorious general, but as a man who had tasted unlimited power, who had commanded absolutely, who had ruled like a king, and who found the constraints of republican government suddenly unbearably restrictive. The die was cast, as Caesar himself reportedly said, when he crossed the Rubicon, that small river that separated Gaul from Italy, that marked the boundary between proconsular command and private citizenship. On January 10th, 49 BC, Caesar led his legions across that stream, and in doing so, declared war on the Roman Senate, on the Roman Republic, on the Roman Constitution itself. Civil war followed, as night follows day, as winter follows autumn. Caesar against Pompey, the conqueror of Gaul against the conqueror of the East, two titans whose ambitions could no longer be contained within the borders of a single republic. Their armies met at Pharsalus, in Greece, in 48 BC, and Caesar's veterans, hardened by 8 years of Gallic warfare, proved superior to Pompey's hastily assembled forces. Pompey fled to Egypt, seeking sanctuary, but found only death, murdered on a beach by agents of the boy King Ptolemy, who thought to curry favor with Caesar by eliminating his rival. Caesar, arriving days later, wept over Pompey's severed head, perhaps with genuine grief, perhaps with calculated theater, perhaps with the complex emotions of a man who had destroyed his greatest rival and found the victory hollow. Caesar's dictatorship, brief though it was, transformed Rome. He reformed the calendar, giving us the Julian calendar we still use. He expanded the Senate, admitting men from Gaul and Spain. He extended citizenship throughout Italy. He planned new cities, new roads, new aqueducts, new forums. His mind ranged across the empire like a surveyor, measuring, planning, designing a future that would outlast his own life by centuries. But the Republic, though wounded, was not dead. And on the Ides of March, 44 BC, a group of senators, led by Brutus and Cassius, men who called themselves liberators, struck Caesar down at the foot of Pompey's statue, 23 wounds, each delivered by a different hand, each a blow struck for republican freedom, for the ancient constitution, for the memory of kings cast out 5 centuries before. Caesar's death, however, did not restore the republic. Instead, it plunged Rome into 13 more years of civil war. Mark Antony, Caesar's lieutenant, fought Octavian, Caesar's heir, while the republic bled, while provinces rebelled, while enemies gathered on the frontiers, while the Mediterranean world watched and wondered if Rome would destroy itself. The final act played out at Actium, in 31 BC, where Octavian's fleet met the combined forces of Antony and Cleopatra, Egypt's last pharaoh, heir to Alexander's general Ptolemy, keeper of the lighthouse of Alexandria, guardian of the greatest library in the ancient world. The battle lasted hours. The consequences lasted centuries. Antony and Cleopatra fled to Egypt, where they committed suicide rather than face capture. Rome's last rivals for Mediterranean supremacy, dying in each other's arms, their deaths marking the end of the Hellenistic age, the end of the Republic, the beginning of something new, something unprecedented, something that would reshape the world. In 27 BC, Octavian, now calling himself Augustus, the revered one, accepted from a grateful Senate the title of Princeps, first citizen. He claimed to have restored the Republic, and indeed, the Senate still met, consuls were still elected, the ancient offices still functioned. But behind this republican facade, Augustus wielded power that no consul, no dictator, had ever possessed. Augustus ruled for 45 years, longer than any Roman leader before or since. He gave the empire peace, the Pax Romana, that golden age when Roman law, Roman roads, Roman trade, Roman culture spread like dawn across the Mediterranean world, from Britain to Mesopotamia, from the Rhine to the Sahara, wherever the eagle flew, there was Rome. Under Augustus and his successors, the empire reached its greatest extent. Trajan, the great conqueror, pushed Roman boundaries to their farthest limits. His columns still stand in Rome, carved with scenes of Dacian wars, Germanic campaigns, Eastern victories, monuments to Roman power, Roman engineering, Roman artistic achievement. Hadrian, the restless emperor, traveled constantly throughout his domains, building walls in Britain, founding cities in Romania, redesigning the Pantheon, that perfect dome that still crowns the Roman skyline. His reign marked perhaps the high point of Roman civilization, when the empire was prosperous, peaceful, unified, confident. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, spent his reign fighting barbarians on the Danube frontier, yet found time to write his meditations, reflections on duty, on virtue, on the burdens of power. His thoughts, preserved for us across 2 millennia, reveal a man struggling to reconcile the demands of empire with the requirements of conscience. the needs of state with the longings of the human heart. But all things, even Rome, must pass. The 3rd century brought crisis, plague, invasion, civil war. The empire split, east and west, each struggling to survive, to maintain the facades of Roman government, Roman culture, Roman identity, in a world that was rapidly changing. Constantine, in the 4th century, moved the capital eastward to Constantinople, New Rome, built on the shores of the Bosphorus, where Europe meets Asia, where the Roman Empire would continue, in Greek dress, for another 1,000 years. The Eastern Empire, Byzantium, keeper of Roman law, Roman traditions, Roman dreams, long after Rome itself had fallen to barbarian kings. In the West, the end came gradually, then suddenly. Visigoth kings ruled from Roman palaces. Vandal fleets sailed from Roman harbors. Ostrogoth nobles wore Roman togas, spoke Roman Latin, claimed Roman titles. The empire did not fall. It transformed, evolved, became something new, something different, but something that still carried the Roman name, the Roman memory, the Roman hope. The last Western Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, Little Augustus, named for both the founder of the city and the founder of the empire, was deposed in 476 CE by a Germanic chieftain named Odoacer, who sent the imperial regalia to Constantinople, declaring that the West no longer needed an emperor. The boy Romulus retired to a villa, pensioned of, forgotten, a footnote to the greatest story ever told. But Rome, the idea of Rome, never died. Charlemagne claimed to restore it. The Holy Roman Empire carried its name for 1,000 years. Napoleon styled himself as Caesar. Hitler dreamed of a 1,000-year Reich. The United States Senate meets in a building designed to echo Roman architecture. Russian Tsars and German Kaisers took their titles from Caesar's name. Even today, we speak of roads leading to Rome, of doing as the Romans do, of Rome not being built in a day. And what was Rome, in the end, but an idea? The idea that different peoples could live under the same law, that diverse cultures could unite in common purpose, that civilization could spread, not through conquest alone, but through the attraction of order, justice, prosperity, citizenship. The idea that a farmer's son from Spain, a merchant's daughter from Syria, a soldier's boy from Britain, could all say with pride, "I am a Roman citizen." Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, remember the Roman roads, still visible from space after 2,000 years. Remember the Roman laws that still govern us. Remember the Roman letters that spell these very words. Remember the Roman calendar that measures our days. Remember that we are all, in some sense, children of Rome, heirs to an empire that never truly ended, but only transformed, adapted, evolved, like the eternal city itself, rising on 7 hills, beside the Tiber, in the heart of Italy, in the center of the world. The Roman Empire, a story without end, a dream made of stone, a civilization that conquered the world, not through force alone, but through the patient work of making strangers into citizens, enemies into allies, barbarians into Romans. A gentle conquest, lasting 2,000 years and counting,